Great. Hey, well, here we are. We're in Portcullis House. I get to meet Tim Farron. Thank you so much for making time for this, Tim.
Chris, it's a pleasure as always.
Everyone in politics now in the UK knows that you're a Christian, but tell us a little bit about your story. How did you come to faith?
Put bluntly, so I was raised in Preston, a lovely town in Lancashire. We lived with my mum. My mum was, you probably call her, she referred to herself as the nouveau poor. So we know the nouveau riche, sort of no class, loads of cash. Mum had loads of class, Guardian reading, intellectual, and no cash whatsoever.
Yeah.
But she was you call her a sort of liberal, brought up in a very vaguely Anglican background.
Yes.
We never went to church.
Liberal politically or liberal?
I mean, I guess actually probably liberal politically. I imagine she floated between, the SDP Liberal Alliance, just to date us, and the Labour Party back in those days. And she ended up being a polytechnic lecturer. You're getting the picture now, aren't you? Of a young woman with sort of left of centre values. So my mum got a job. She was working at what is now the University of Central Lancashire. In those days it was Preston Poly, and she was seconded to a college in Singapore. And me and my sister went out there with her, and we were plonked in a nice house in the south of the island, which belonged to the college that my mum was working for. The previous tenants had been also lecturers at the college. They were a Christian couple. And frankly, if you're out there for 5 weeks and you're 18, you're on your own, you've only got so much money, there's only so much time you want to spend with your sister. In the end, and it rains a fair amount, you run out of stuff to do. I ended up reading the books on the shelves.
Oh, really?
I guess the books that really grabbed me were those that talked about prophecy, what we call apologetics today, stuff that was about evidence.
Yes.
And it struck me that Christianity was not just an interesting belief system. Jesus wasn't just a historical figure, that Christianity was dynamic. And to put it bluntly, it was true.
Wow.
And that's the point. I became a Christian, put my trust in Christ sometime in early August 1988. Loads of ups and downs since then.
Yes. That's fantastic. A lot of people think that to believe in Christianity is to switch your brain off. But from your testimony, it is switching your brain on and exploring that evidence. In political life right now, Christianity has a bit, I guess, a mixed review. Back in the day when Alistair Campbell was kind of press secretary for the Blair government, there was a famous statement made that government really doesn't do God. What's been your experience as a Christian in terms of that idea of, I guess, the marginalisation of faith, and Christian faith in particular?
I think Alistair Campbell would say that when he said that, he was essentially protecting Tony Blair from himself. Tony Blair is a man of faith and would probably have spoken about such matters. And when he said we, it was almost the royal we, the vicarious royal we. Tony Blair doesn't talk about God. We, the Blair office, we, the number 10 operation, don't do God. And I can understand why you do that. There have been other politicians who have had things they did not want to talk about, and the best way you or your press operation deal with it is to completely Jeff boycott, straight back, bore the living daylights out of the journalist till eventually they move on. And I've seen that happen with other characters, shall we say. That was clearly Alistair Campbell's intention, and I guess from that point of view, it worked. For me, I feel that Christians have a duty not to bury their faith in Christ away. Not ram it down anybody's throat, but nevertheless be very clear what it is that you believe, whilst being accepting of everybody else. And so, in many ways, my experience is a good one, because the opportunity fundamentally to serve is what being an MP is about. If you ask me what's the most useful thing from a Christian perspective about being a member of Parliament, it's the ability to serve people. So pretty much this week we will reach the 100,000th piece of casework that we've done in my office as an MP, as a constituency MP, since I got elected, which we think is probably some kind of record. And it's about, for me, commitment to people, serving them, meeting their needs, confounding their expectations of politicians, being the one that keeps the promises, one that goes further than they expect, the one who doesn't drop them when everybody else drops them. So that's what it means to me. But certainly in the wider context, there is the need for us not to, when it's safe to do so, to not shy away. And this is a country where it is safe.
Yes.
to put your head above
Yes.
the parapet for all that you might get some grief for it.
That's right. That's right. Well, just watching you from the outside, as it were, being really open about your faith and the kind of issues that you've been championing, even riding on the train to make sure that the train lines are rightly kind of scrutinised, cheering you on. And I guess for me it was really sad when you came to the point where you needed to step down from leading the Liberal Democrat Party, and in your kind of resignation speech, you talked about, I guess, that we're not living in a tolerant and inclusive society where your faith became an issue. What do you think it could look like? What should it look like if we were going to be more inclusive as regards to faith?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm always keen to stress this to Christians in this country, and if I got the chance to say it on the other side of the pond, I'd say the same thing, that if we're not careful as Christians, can spend too much time talking about being persecuted and marginalised.
Sure.
First of all, we live in a free and safe country to be a Christian, and that is a great thing. Secondly, insofar as Christians do get stick for being Christians, that's how it is.
Yes.
That's how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
If you find a culture in which, a worldly culture in which you are not finding yourself living a countercultural existence as a Christian, you are doing it wrong.
Right.
And what's the Christian response to people who are rude or offensive or dismissive? It's to turn the other cheek, or in our modern parlance, take it on the chin.
Yes.
And that is not only what we're told to do by God, it's also the best look. It's not a good look to be whining about being marginalised. So that's my advice to Christians out there is be absolutely concerned about the rights of Christians being persecuted, genuinely persecuted in very difficult places on earth. Be concerned, utterly concerned about the rights and freedoms of others. But so far as your own rights and freedoms, take it on the chin, turn the other cheek. I think we have, just to answer your question though, got to an interesting place in Western politics. I think the era of it being just normal to go to church is 2 generations ago now. Even my generation didn't, and the generation behind me probably just about did. And America and the UK are very similar, and of course jarringly different. And one of the great differences is, from a political point of view, it might sound kind of slightly flippant, this is that in America it seems that you have to invent a faith in order to be taken seriously as a candidate, whereas in this country you've got to pretend you haven't got one. And I'd argue in both cases that's just stupid.
Yes.
I think where we've got to in the discourse in the West at the moment is a sense that religious faith, and I'd always argue that Christianity isn't a religion, but that's a separate matter. So we'll call it religious faith, that values that one has because of one's faith are somehow inadmissible.
Yes.
Whereas values that you've got because you've just wandered through life and picked them up from places that you may acknowledge and others you've just subconsciously picked them up, that's fine.
Yes.
Now, that's nonsense, isn't it?
It is nonsense.
But that is absolutely the way society looks today.
Yeah.
You must leave your faith at the door, Tim. Well, you're going to leave all your values at the door? Does every Marxist have to disown their Marxism before they go into the debating chamber or to start writing anything? No, of course they don't. And so I'm not going to leave my worldview at the door, just as I don't expect anybody else to leave theirs. There is, however, a respectfulness that we need to have for one another, and we need to understand what liberalism and tolerance actually means. Liberalism and tolerance is not about assimilating and everybody being the same. That's terrifyingly totalitarian. Liberalism and tolerance is about us all holding to our worldviews, those worldviews potentially being changed by the debate that we have with one another, but respecting and fighting for the rights of those who think very different things to us. That's proper liberalism, and my fear is in the West, liberalism is, as I've said elsewhere, eating itself.
Yes. And it does seem that illiberalism or intolerance does apply particularly to faith. I've noticed it in other areas. So, we do a lot of work with social workers. I run a charity trying to help Christians come forward for fostering or adoption. And some, by no means the majority, but some social workers have said things like, well, why don't you raise these children in an ideologically neutral environment?
There isn't one, is there?
There isn't one, that's right. And I often say, look, when I come into a room, I'm male, I'm brown, and I'm Christian. And I can't turn off any of those identities. It's a core part of who I am. I've heard a lot of people begin to talk about bringing your whole self to work, including your faith and including your ethnicity and including your gender. Are you hopeful? Do you think things are changing for the better, or?
Well, who knows? I think that in terms of the movement of society in various different directions, it's worth bearing in mind. I mean, we Christians are always quoting C.S. Lewis, but
Yes.
one thing that I came across not that long ago that I hadn't previously been aware of was his concept of the snobbery of chronology, the idea that today we've got it right, and we don't say we think that, but society today feels very comfortable that we are on a journey of progress.
Yes.
That we're currently at the pinnacle of human values and of progress, and that we'll get better all the same.
Yes.
And therefore, what went behind is a combination of ridiculous and wicked.
Yes.
And if you look back at the 70s, the 50s, we look at it now through a prism from 2018 of thinking those things, those values, those social mores, they are ridiculous and wicked. Let me just stop for a moment and tell you for certain that the Britain of 2068 will look back at this society and think it was a combination of ridiculous and wicked.
Yeah.
And I can't predict on what basis,
Right.
because I'm not there.
Yes.
And the one thing you can be sure of is that there will be value systems that will critique Christianity as being out of date and wrong and harmful and all the rest of it, just as there are value systems today. What I can predict also confidently is that those value systems and critiques will die away and
Yes.
become out of date.
That's right.
And Christianity will continue.
Yes.
How can I say that? I have got 2,000 years of solid evidence.
Yeah, that's really good. They often say, isn't it, he who marries the spirit of the age is a widower in the morning. We will see a lot of change. The philosopher John Gray, in his book 7 Types of Atheism, actually argues that this whole notion of progress owes its origin to the Christian story, that we believe history is on a journey and it is actually going somewhere. So again, ironic that it's progress that is the reason we might critique Christianity. If we were to bring our whole selves to work, if Christians were to bring the best of what they have into public life, what do you think we've got to offer? What are some of the good things that Christianity has to offer our society?
Well, perhaps the most countercultural aspect of being a Christian or Christianity is the focus upon the other rather than on the self.
Yeah.
And the notion that you are genuinely focused in a self-sacrificing way on the needs of other people, whether it be at a lower or a higher level. So I guess in one sense, living that out would be the most effective way to do that. And so letting people know you're a Christian is important. But once they know, you don't need to bang on about it.
Yeah.
Just get on with it.
Yeah.
And be somebody. But you need to remember then at that point you are a shop window for Christ. And so I think that the most useful thing we can do is to be radically humble and serving of other people.
That's right, and I see that in you, and it's been an honour to spend some time talking with you. So thank you for your service. 100,000 bits of work that you've been doing for your constituency.
Mostly down to my team.
Well,
so
you're very humble.
I'm the brand. That's
that
all.
is fantastic, and congratulations on that. You were kind enough to write a commendation.
I was
for this
great book.
New book.
Read the manuscript. It's very good.
Thank you. And I guess Faiththeism shares a lot of the desires and interests that you've expressed today. We do live in a society that doesn't quite know what to do with faith, and sometimes that gets expressed in terms of the marginalisation or intolerance, and no one's claiming persecution, but just, I suppose, a fear about what people of faith bring into our culture. And this book is trying to address that, but by, I suppose, building bridges with atheists and secularists. That was the intention.
Really important, and I'll tell you what is also important. We live in a time, and I don't brandish this term around in any offensive sense, which is it tends to be religiously illiterate.
Yes.
Because people haven't been churched, people haven't grown up in a kind of religious family setting anywhere near as much as they did a couple of generations ago. But that also flips on its head that those of us who are Christians, there are so many people out there who don't quite know how to engage with the world.
Yes.
And will form maybe harsh or inaccurate viewpoints
Yes.
of how do you relate, how do you engage, how do you get a hearing for the
Yes.
gospel.
Yeah.
And so understanding that other points of view come from people whose intentions are good.
Yes, good.
Is incredibly important. So
Yeah.
it works both ways, which is why
Excellent.
this is an important book.
Yeah, I was trying to do that actually, and with I read a lot of books by atheists about Christians. The thing is, I don't recognise the Christians that they talk about.
That's right.
They seem to find the kind of worst case
They're
scenario.
all Dot Cotton at best.
They are, or they
At
want to
best.
blow up an abortion clinic, or
Yeah.
they're
exactly.
Westboro Baptist Church.
That's
They're,
right.
they're a fringe kind of extreme group. But equally, I read a lot of Christian books about atheists, and I don't recognise the atheists I'm seeing there either, because they're all, Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens. And actually, atheists are often our best colleagues, our best mates. They're the people that we, go down the pub with. They're the people that are on the PTA with us. So again, we were trying to demystify both Christianity and atheism and say, we do have our differences, but we have a lot more in common than we think. That was the idea.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Tim. All the
It's been a
best.
great pleasure.
All the
in
best.
Good luck with the
stage of your-
book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.